The popular dating podcast, the Whatever Podcast, recently had Melina Göransson, popular Swedish Twitch streamer, on their show, during which the topic of physical abuse within marriage came up. Following the show, Melina's editor cut the segment down to a TikTok bite-sized chunk and posted it to the internet for all to see.
There's someone that's very, very young and goes into a marriage and has kids when they're like 18, 19, 20. A year into the relationship, it gets really, really abusive. Even though it might be rare from what you guys think.
It is.
If it would happen, what would you recommend for those people? Would they divorce, or do you want them to keep going in the relationship?
Keep going.
You can't divorce. That's not a real thing.
Even though it might be like physically abusive?
You got to endure. People are too...
You want to stick into the
People
relationship?
are just...
I mean, look,
people
I'm gonna be
nowadays
honest.
are just...
For anyone that might be in that situation, what would you recommend?
Okay,
endure.
I'll tell
Would
you
they
what.
give
I'll
up
tell you what.
divorce?
It is such an extreme example that I can't give a prescription for what other people should do.
What about if two people get married, they have a kid, and then the wife starts cheating? Do you think they should divorce?
Absolutely. Jesus himself said in cases of adultery, divorce is
So you think that
permissible.
divorce is worse than physical abuse?
For the
Or
children?
cheating, sorry. You think that
is
cheating is
than
worse than physical abuse?
For the
Sorry.
children, yes.
Absolutely
I think I'm not
Okay,
going to
no,
say this
divorce-
is worse.
divorce
I mean,
is worse for the children.
And Melina's clip has since gone viral. The other guests on the podcast have been very vocal about being none too pleased about the framing of the cut in question, or people's take on the cut in question. So I'm here to add my fuel to the fire. Take the clip, break it down point by point, and respond. And just so we're clear, the original clip, as well as an archived supercut of the original segment, complete with timestamps, are going to be linked in the top comment pinned down below. Additionally, I think a full disclaimer should be made. I will be cutting out the points of the segment that didn't really have anything to do with the conversation whatsoever, just for the sake of brevity, because I don't want to barrel through those, so. But let us begin. The main players in this segment are, on the left side, Chase, John, and other John, and on the right side, Pixie, Melina, and Steven. So now that we have who we're talking about, some preamble to establish important background information about our list of characters and their upcoming conversation. The conversation in question finds its inception following commentary from Billy, discussing her experiences dealing with men in the prison population and the epidemic of fatherless homes.
There was one part I wanted to come in on, which was how would we make men great again? And I have built a platform on praising men, I guess, and trying to recognize men's struggles. But I also want to make it clear that I do hold men accountable. I worked at I think I talked about this last time, but I worked at a prison for 4 years, all 4 years of college. I worked at a max security men's prison, and I think that's what got me into kind of protecting men. And every single situation I dealt with in the prison, I tutored like 4 guys a day when I went in there. Did not have a father. And I would say it was 50-50. 50% of the cases, the father walked out, and 50% of the cases, the mother would not let the father be in the child's picture.
Situation.
Yeah, in the child's life. So, at least in the criminal side of it, fathers in the home play like every situation I've seen. So I wanted to make that clear, that me supporting men doesn't mean I'm not holding them accountable.
And this preamble is integral to understanding how we arrive at the clip I showed initially, because it opens up the floodgates of dialogue to discuss the statistical importance of a 2-parent household, which ultimately becomes the reason that props up the importance of the endure mindset we saw earlier. Now, Chase takes this commentary and he goes on to pivot the conversation to a point that I think I and a lot of other people can definitely get behind.
Are you saying that in order to make men great again, we need to have as many fathers in the home as possible?
Yes, absolutely.
I agree with that.
Every situation I ever saw with fathers not in the home was horrible. It was basically, I don't want to speak on any specific cases, but when fathers weren't in the home, men went to a lot of gang-related situations, and they would do things to fit into the hierarchy, and doing those things would be...
Basically, the argument is that there is a statistical correlation between young men raised in single-mother households and young men who find themselves in prison, and no one disputes that fact. there is an obvious correlation. Many people also agree on that front. For instance, Other John and Pixie, they both are two people who could not be more diametrically opposed in terms of their ideologies to each other, but they can come to find common ground on this particular piece of information.
They go to gangs and prisons because they have no sense of family and community at home. Because 9 times out of 10, they're coming from a single mother household, which is like the bane on any existence of any society.
Yeah.
Single mother households are the cancer of this earth. If you want to have like a good, stable, functioning society, single mother households are the absolute antithesis of what you need to be doing.
And feminism has contributed to that, which is
for
why
sure,
it's degenerate.
1000%.
Okay, wait. I just want to say this very quickly. I agree that single parent households are
Single mother.
Sorry,
Single
I
mother.
Yeah, single mother households is bad. I completely agree with you guys.
Part of the reason for this might be because those households lack a strong male role model. Sure, I'll grant. But I would actually venture to guess that the lack of a strong male role model has less to do with it than the house's overall socioeconomic status. You see, statistically, single mothers tend to have less income at a median of $26,000 a year compared to single fathers who clock in at around $40,000 a year, which is a vast difference and makes a lot of difference. Mind you. It's also worth noting that having both mom and dad present in a household with low SES does not itself have the mitigating effect on bad outcomes we think it should if the mere presence of a male in the household is the ultimate reason for those differences in outcomes. Therefore, I'd argue that the reason isn't because single mothers don't make for good role models for their children, and specifically for their sons, thus kids are more likely to suffer those bad outcomes. Rather, single mothers have distinctively less or lower incomes than single fathers do, and that low SES is the reason for bad outcomes with children from the single parent household. Pixie follows up her agreement with the following, which is what spurred the controversy that sparked this particular video.
I feel like a lot of times when people use this rhetoric, they sometimes paint this false picture that it's okay for people to stay together if it means not being a single mother household, even if the situation, the relationship is super toxic, abusive, just not healthy. So I agree, single parent, single mother households are horrible, completely agree with that, but I do think they're better than staying with somebody if he's being abusive to you. If he's hitting you, you should not raise your child in that environment. You should get your child out of there because that person is being a danger to your family, to you, and to your child.
And that's a perfectly non-controversial take.
So I
agree with that.
Yeah.
And that could have been the end of this whole conversation. The video would never have been made, the clip never would have come to fruition, and no one would have gotten pissy about it. But you may have caught it. Other John doesn't quite agree with Pixie's statement.
If he's hitting you.
And this is where the conversation kind of spirals, because John and Other John cannot wait to bring up how much of an outlier such conditions are for some reason in marriage.
But that is still an anomaly. I mean, like we mentioned earlier,
that's just an outright falsehood. It's about 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men that have experienced intimate partner violence in their lifetime, and about 1 in 7 women and 1 in 25 men that have been injured by their intimate partner. Now that statistic also includes things like slapping, shoving, pushing, so I will be more graphic with my qualifications here. About 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men have been victims of severe physical violence, which includes things like beating, burning, strangling, etc. So it turns out that it's not so extreme an anomaly from either side of the gender spectrum in actuality. And then John goes on to say something about 80% of marriages recovering from it.
This is a true statistic.
80%
of couples can recover from that in 5 years.
And honestly, I couldn't find any sources to back this up. I don't know what he could be talking about in actuality. And if anyone has any ideas on what he might be referring to, feel free to link me in the comments, but like I said, I couldn't find it, so good luck. John then goes on to lament on the outcomes of young men that grow up in single-parent households. Again.
And I think it's fundamentally selfish, and you can tell because the type of people who say that, they're like, well, I just wasn't happy, so it's better for the child. It's absolutely not. It's not better for the child.
Really
but they think that because they're so prideful, they don't want to address whatever they're doing wrong, and their partner is probably, because water seeks its own level, probably just as prideful and narcissistic and doesn't want to address what's wrong and fix themselves. And so they think, well, I'm not happy, so the child must really not be happy. It destroys, especially young boys, if they don't have their father in the household, they're not socialized properly. Like, they're literally screwed for the rest of their lives. Daughters, they don't, it's not as effective to them. I mean, they like get a little bit more promiscuous with the guys they date, but in terms of like literally just like derailing someone's trajectory in life, young girls can more or less recover pretty well, but boys are like fucked if their dad's not present.
I just wanted...
Which were all concessions that Pixie made about single mother households earlier. The conversation, however, has since shifted to talking about marital abuse, and in this case, it's worth noting that the stats are not on John's side. Again, when children have traumatic childhoods, specifically in households where intimate partner violence happens, the trauma those kids witness has lasting consequences in the form of physical health problems, behavioral problems in adolescence like delinquency, alcohol, and substance abuse, and emotional difficulties in adulthood such as depression, anxiety, PTSD, and perhaps, I'll grant, maybe perhaps John or other John or even Chase would attempt to make the case for hiding such conduct from the children in the household, but we know that that doesn't happen, as children are in fact exposed to IPV to the tune of 1 in 15 children each year. Perhaps the couple works out their marital issues within 5 years, as John has alleged that they do, but 5 years from birth to 18 is about 28% of a kid's life, where they are at their most impressionable. So if it does take you only 5 years to sort out your abuse issues with your partner within the marriage, that might be a small percent of your life in the grand scheme of things. But that's a third of your child's life, the consequences of which are variable per age group. Things like developmental regression from birth to age 5, school avoidance truancy, and aggression between ages 6 to 11, antisocial behavior, educational failure, substance abuse in ages 12 to 18. You are setting your kids up for failure if you keep them in houses where IPV is rampant. So yeah, single-parent households suck in terms of outcomes, but dual-parent households where IPV is rampant are just as damaging. And they are not rare. And this might be a little bit of a hot take, but I am of the opinion that no role model is better than a shitty one. No father figure is better than a shitty father figure. Just like no mother figure is better than a shitty mother figure. Simply put, if my partner were ever to lay his hands on me, it's over. We're done. And that flight response is only exacerbated if there are kids in the household. Because if he can lay a hand on me, the woman he loves, and took vows to honor and protect and love and cherish, etc., etc., I don't want to even risk the possibility that he could lay hands on our children, and hurt them, or worse, because those are my babies. And I will not for a second hesitate to protect them from even the possibility of such an evil, up to and including evil from their father, if it came down to it. And I would expect the same of my husband. If I were to prove unstable enough to start knocking his bones every night when I came home from work, it is his duty as their parent to protect those children from even a whiff of danger that I pose to them. I have no interest in playing a game of chicken with my children and their lives. Thank you very much.
Melina, what was it that you wanted to say?
Yeah, I was just curious. I just wanted to see like an honest answer on this one. If there's someone that's very, very young, might be really religious and like values marriage a lot, and goes into a marriage and has kids when they're like 18, 19, 20, and then a year into the relationship, it gets really, really abusive.
From who?
Would you... From both.
This is so rare.
Anyone
So
really.
Rare.
I mean, it happens.
Go on.
My point is, I'm just, even though it might be rare from what you guys think,
it is.
If it would happen, what would you recommend for those people to do? Would they divorce, or do you want them to keep going in the relationship?
Keep going.
So to repeat the question, what would you recommend a woman who finds herself in an abusive marriage do? Divorce or keep going?
You can't divorce. I mean, that's not a real thing. You can like separate. See, his Catholic background shines through. He knows. You can't divorce. You can separate, but you can't actually divorce. That's not a real thing.
So John thinks you can't divorce in such cases. And Melina clarifies she does mean abusive marriages.
Even though it might be like physically abusive.
Other John, well, we already got a preamble of what he thinks.
Keep going.
He definitely had this to say about the subject.
You got to endure. People are too.
You want to stick into the
wanna-
relationship?
People are
is it
just.
called?
See, I mean, look,
people
I'm gonna be
nowadays
honest.
are just pussies. Everybody fucking quits. Everybody gives up. It's too hard. I'm this XYZ. This is why I'm special, so I can fuck up this entire situation based upon me being special. And the reality is, people just haven't learned to fucking endure. There have been hard times in relationship. I'm sure you guys had hard times in relationship. Any relationship has hard times, and it
Okay.
is what it is. You need to push through, and you need
What if
to
the
endure
kid
because
is
we're in
getting
this.
abused?
Hold on, because we're in this situation now, like where everybody's just creating these like super nuanced, like 1% example of like, well, what if the kid's fucking transgender, black, and abused, and he's a Black Lives Matter supporter? Like, cool, okay, I get like that one fucking
No, but I'm
minute
asking
situation.
for anyone that might be in that situation, what would you recommend?
Okay, here's-
Endure.
I'll tell
Would
you
they
what.
give up
I'll tell you what
divorce?
I would
I don't-
do.
that's-
I'll tell you what.
Endure.
And there you have it. Other John, Modern Life Dating, thinks you should endure an abusive relationship. It's just hard times, as he puts it. He makes a point to emphasize that you must endure the abuse and doubles down on it, triples down on it, quadruples down on it. That's the context. Yeah, he might be like 5 White Claws deep at this point, but he's not taking it back now that he's sober and online. He's getting behind the quoted out of context defense. Chase, the only smart person on this side of the argument, has the good sense to kind of attempt to separate his position from the boneheaded hot takes of other John.
I'll tell you what I would do. If my daughter was in a relationship with a guy and she gets married to him and he starts abusing her a
Kill the
year
guy.
into it, I'm gonna be showing up on their doorstep and teaching him some lessons.
Exactly.
That's what I would do. I also would
but,
not if I didn't have the capacity to do that for some reason, I don't know. I wouldn't want my daughter in that situation, quite frankly.
Then he chickens out and gives the endure argument some credence.
And I understand the argument to endure because I have people close to me who grew up in abusive households and it lasted for periods of time and it was a phase and they endured through it and they ended up raising healthy, successful families to an extent.
So
they
you
weren't the
would say
healthiest
that
families
At the end of which he then again backs down from that assertion.
to an extent.
So
they
you
weren't the
would say
healthiest
that
families.
So that point is irrelevant. Don't endure. It's not worth it, I guess. Melina then asks them to restate their positions, to solidify them, because that answer from Chase was rather wishy-washy.
To an extent.
So
they
you
weren't the
would say
healthiest
that
families.
to stick in those relationships that might be abusive to everyone involved and a child, if there's a
I'm
child
not
involved.
saying like,
who
hey,
is-
stick
that's
in
an
the relationship and get the shit beat out of
extreme-
you by
No,
a
no, no,
husband.
you're saying-
I'm
I
not.
think
I'm
you're
not.
right.
It's an
I
extreme.
think you guys-
I'm just asking you what you believe.
I'm
on
just
this one
telling you-
specific thing.
I-
Even
I'm
though
not
it's a
telling
small
you-
extreme thing, I'm just asking you what you think if you should stick in that relationship or not.
It is such an extreme example that I can't give a prescription for what other people should do. There is an element of
How do you guys feel about
value?
third-
Hold on. There is an element of value in what he's saying, but all I can tell you is what I would do
How
as,
do you guys feel
as a
about- do you
father
guys
of
all
a
have
daughter in a
opinions about, like-
situation like that.
That was about the most limp-dicked response to a very easy question that does not necessitate a million qualifiers. If you can't give a prescription on a softball question, what are you doing giving advice on how to make men great again? Side point incoming courtesy of Steven. It's actually kind of hilarious, the juxtaposition of wishy-washy responses they can have about marital abuse versus that of, say, third trimester abortions.
Do you have opinions about third trimester abortion?
It's
Yes.
terrible.
Listen,
It's
Okay,
terrible.
look at how quickly you can debate it. Do you know how
Terrible.
rare third trimester abortions are? They're also really
Yeah,
fucking
they
rare. But
are.
you immediately had a visceral reaction to that,
Yeah.
right? There are households where parents are abusive to children. Like, that's not like an unfathomable thing. But for you to have that immediate visceral reaction to a type of abortion, that's so incredibly rare. But
Yeah,
then when it's
I
like,
mean, we're
well, could you
talking
have-
about like a guy like getting drunk and like beating
have to be
beating his
getting
wife
drunk.
occasionally versus like somebody puncturing a woman's stomach with a needle and injecting euthanasia into the baby's eye socket.
I'm
It's
just
like a
saying, all I'm
grisly,
saying is
terrible
that
thing.
third trimester
And it's
abortion
murder.
is incredibly rare. But you have a visceral immediate reaction to that. But to hypothesize on could there
But
possibly
well,
be
okay, so
Which are less statistically significant at 1% of the total abortion rate, compared to the, again, 20 to 25% of interpersonal relationships with violence. The argument being made is that the rareness of an occurrence, whether it be marital abuse or third trimester abortions, obviously doesn't have any bearing on the issue of what is recommended to be done in such a circumstance. Even if it were super rare for abuse to happen in marriages, you should be able to engage with the marital abuse hypothesis unimpeded, similar to how you did in the third trimester abortion hypothetical. Quit dancing around the question and own a fucking position. I mean, at least other John is out here telling people to endure their toxic relationships with his full chest, no exceptions.
Endure.
Except in the case of infidelity. And finally, after completely useless input from Mary off in the corner, Chase decides to take a position on the matter of abuse in marriage at long last.
I mean, look, I'll say this. I know there's like the Christian Catholic position and all that kind of stuff. If a woman is in a situation where she's getting the shit beat out of her by her husband and like he might kill her, yeah, she should leave the marriage, in my opinion.
Like pulling teeth, that was. But of course, John Doyle has to bring it around again to requalify that it's not the reason women are divorcing, actually.
But statistically, like, that's not what it is. It's kind of like with the abortion anomaly. That's not like the majority of abortions. So let's like talk about what actually happens. And what actually happens when people are getting divorced isn't these types of scenarios. It's like literally initiated, you'll probably know the stat, between 2/3 and 80% of the time by women. And the plurality of that reason is they feel unfulfilled. They want a new chapter in their life. It's like the eat, pray, love phenomenon. Yeah. That should be outlawed. You legally actually should not be able to do that.
Which, well, it's not the eat, pray, love phenomena, whatever that means. But the ultimate reasons are actually listed as follows: a lack of commitment, they argue too much, infidelity, married too young, unrealistic expectations, a lack of equality in the relationship, a lack of preparation for marriage, and domestic violence or abuse. Hey look, there's that 25% statistic again. But I already did a video addressing some of the issues as they present themselves in another absolute state of relationships on my channel called The Help in the Wallet. And so to summarize, women make up nearly half of the US workforce. Women do most of the housework in the US. Housework overload has been positively associated with psychological distress in women. Perceived sole responsibility as household admins is positively associated with a strain on mothers' emotional well-being, with the added bonus that these women report lower relationship satisfaction, and perceived inequity in the division of household labor is negatively associated with marital happiness, and in fact, increases the odds that the wife divorces her husband. So, with conflict and arguing being one of the top contenders for reasons why couples divorce, is it any wonder why women might be initiating divorce 70% of the time, given these statistics? Go check it out. And I agree that what John is describing, and even what I articulated in my video, stand a greater chance of being salvaged given enough effort. It only is salvageable when both parties are willing to salvage the relationship, which requires concessions a lot of the time. However, if you're just enduring it and nothing changes, this is by definition insanity. And I can't, in good conscience, support that. And then the final hypothetical from Melina.
I want to ask one more scenario, okay?
Please.
What about if two people get married, they have a kid, and then the wife starts cheating? Do you think they should divorce?
You'd think that the answer to this question, based on their abuse takes, would be an obvious endure. Think of the children, the sons. You must endure for them, for the quality of their outcomes is at stake. Right? But no, of course not.
Absolutely.
They should divorce then?
Jesus himself
You don't
said.
think
But it wasn't
Jesus,
illegal.
hold on.
Adultery.
Jesus
And you
himself
could like
said.
work things through, right?
Jesus himself said in cases of adultery, divorce is
So you
permissible.
think that divorce is worse than physical abuse?
No,
For the
cheating.
Or
children?
cheating, sorry. You
Cheating
think that
is
cheating is
worse
worse
than
than
physical
physical
abuse.
abuse?
For the
Sorry.
children, yes.
Absolutely
I think I'm not going to
Wait,
say
no,
this is
divorce?
worse.
Divorce
I mean,
is worse for the
I
children.
already- I already
Is
said.
cheating
I already
worse than
said that
physical
if a
Cheating,
woman's
yeah.
getting abused, yeah, I think she should leave.
The reason why I wanted to respond to this segment is really rather simple. If these are some of the best role models the manosphere can prop up as a shining example for men to aspire to be in their relationships or just in general for how to be, then the West is frankly doomed. These three men are not the role models or the dating coaches I would want my future children looking to for guidance on how to conduct themselves and comport themselves in their relationships.